You're either one of two people. You've already purchased Bitcoin and you're looking to add to your stack, or you have been eyeing Bitcoin for a while now and you're not sure exactly when you should pull the trigger and execute that buy order. In this video, I am going to be telling you exactly why you should consider packing your bags and moving from where you are today before you actually pull the trigger and either add to your Bitcoin position or buy Bitcoin for the first time. For those of you that have been in Bitcoin long enough, you understand how quickly Bitcoin can go parabolic. Let's not forget about the time in 2017, and within a 30-day period, Bitcoin went from 5,500 to 19,700. You understand that inflation is inevitable. We've seen countries like Zimbabwe and Venezuela, we've seen their currencies get absolutely crushed. And we've seen many countries over the last 100 years, we have seen their currencies failed as well. We know that history will repeat itself. So if you've already bought Bitcoin, you have totally gone through the possibilities of the fact that Bitcoin can either make you really rich or really poor. And that's if you're someone who's riding on a Bitcoin as one of your main assets. And honestly, I have been there. I have just honestly dreamed about what can potentially happen with Bitcoin because I absolutely know it's possible. And Bitcoin is being currently put in a situation where it's primed to take off. With the Fed just printing insane amounts of money, we know that this is Bitcoin's perfect opportunity to thrive. So you've been watching Bitcoin, right? Over the last month or two, it's been bouncing around between 11,000 and 12,000. You've either been sitting on the sidelines waiting, maybe you're dollar cost averaging in, maybe you're adding on the dips. I don't know exactly what you're doing or what you're planning on doing, but here is where the two rivers meet. Did you know it's possible to be a US citizen? You do not have to renounce your US citizenship. You can still live in the US. And you could pay 0 federal taxes. In this video, I am going to be getting into that. So let's start out by saying that residents of Puerto Rico pay 0 federal taxes. Whether you were born here, whether you've moved here in the last 5 years or in the last 20 years, if you're a resident of Puerto Rico or a bona fide resident of Puerto Rico, you pay 0 federal taxes. So obviously we know, right? If you live in the States, you pay federal taxes plus your state taxes. But Puerto Rico has a very unique opportunity for bona fide residents. Bona fide residents is someone who was not actually born in Puerto Rico, but someone that comes from the mainland or even another country and then moves to Puerto Rico. So like I said, you come to Puerto Rico and you owe $0 to the federal government. But how much do you owe to the Puerto Rican government? There's something called Act 60, and Act 60 gives you the ability to pay 0% capital gains tax. So 0% to the Puerto Rican government through Act 60 and 0% because you're a Puerto Rican resident and you owe 0% to the federal government. So Act 60, you pay 0%, but is there a catch? Well, sorta, but this is still a heck of a deal. When you have an active Act 60 decree, there are a few requirements that you have to mark off in order to be eligible for the program. The first thing is that each year you will owe $10,000, but that is actually going to a nonprofit in Puerto Rico. So there are two different categories. $5,000 has to go to one list of nonprofits and $5,000 to another. So it has to be split up between two nonprofits here in Puerto Rico. You also cannot have any affiliation to that nonprofit organization. So if you're familiar with the tax incentives in Puerto Rico, you previously knew that this was Act 22. Act 22 had the same exact situation, but the only difference is that those people that filed before mid-2019 only owe $5,000 a year to a Puerto Rican nonprofit organization. I personally filed back in, I think it was 2018, so I am technically an Act 22 decree holder, but anyone who has applied after mid-2019 is now a individual Act 60 decree holder. So the main thing that has recently changed between the two decrees is the $5,000 donation annually versus now it's bumped up to $10,000. And I also believe that you will now have to purchase a property within 2 years of being here. But let me tell you what, if you don't really have any interest in a big property long term, you could easily rent something, and I'm sure there's properties available here for like $10,000. It's not going to be pretty, but if you just want to check that box, I'm sure that's an option. So what else do you have to complete to be this Act 60 decree holder and pay 0% on your Bitcoin? There's two main tests that you'll want to make sure that you have covered at all times, and that's if you ever get audited. The first is a presence test. There are multiple ways to complete this presence test. One simple way, I'll give you an example, is you have to spend more days in Puerto Rico than you do in the US. There are other ways you can meet that presence test, but I will not get into that now. The second thing you must cover is a closer connections test. There are many different things here, and you don't necessarily have to have all of them, but you absolutely want to have the majority of them. This is the main thing. If you ever get audited, it needs to be overwhelmingly obvious that you do live in Puerto Rico and that you do have a closer connection to Puerto Rico. Here are just a few things that they may question you about when it comes to the closer connections test. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link down below to the publication that lists all of this out for you. You can get all of the details there. So things you may want to consider or be asked are, do your kids go to school in Puerto Rico? If you have a spouse, do they reside in Puerto Rico? Are you involved and affiliated with clubs and organizations in Puerto Rico? Do you have a home in Puerto Rico, or is your lease in Puerto Rico? Is your main bank located in Puerto Rico? Are your personal belongings and valuables located in Puerto Rico? At the end of the day, you must commit to Puerto Rico because it's just not worth it. There are some people that try to bend the rules, but I don't see the point. Puerto Rico is a great place to be. You have the entire Caribbean Ocean. You have countless hikes every weekend that you could go to with beautiful, stunning waterfalls. You have the history of Old San Juan. You have the culture here. Puerto Rico is a pretty special place to be. Although it has its nuances and quirks, and island time is absolutely a thing, nothing feels better than being able to keep all of the money that you earn. So let me get clear. This is not financial advice. This is not advice from a CPA or a lawyer. I highly recommend that you reach out to local CPAs that specialize in the tax incentives here in Puerto Rico. Reach out to CPAs and reach out to lawyers to see if your situation is right. Another thing you want to consider is this. If you already have Bitcoin and you are moving to Puerto Rico, there are some things you may want to consider. Many lawyers will give you different advice and CPAs will give you different advice when it comes to dealing with the crypto or the investments that you already have. One thing I know for sure is that, let's say for example, you have 10 Bitcoin, and it doesn't matter what price that you bought them at, you never sell them, you live in Puerto Rico for 10 years. If you sell after the 10-year mark, then you will basically be granted the 0% capital gains. But if you sell before, then you will have to pay partial taxes to the federal government and whatever state that you originally came from. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you bought Bitcoin at $10,000. Let's say you have 100 Bitcoin at $10,000. If you sell, let's say, for example, at $12,500, then whatever the profit is, you will basically pay that, and then you can rebuy when you come to Puerto Rico. But this is the thing. If you just don't have any Bitcoin and you come directly to Puerto Rico, you will never have to deal with the tax at the state or federal level. You just have to make sure that you have already claimed residency here when you bought that Bitcoin or any other stock or any other asset. So maybe you want a fresh start, maybe you want a new scene, maybe you're seeking amazing weather. Sunshine year-round, warm ocean water and palm trees, a pina colada by the beach. Maybe you're looking to pick up a sport like windsurfing or kite surfing or just surfing in general. How about the boat life? Puerto Rico is a special place. The beaches are impeccable, and meeting people here is really easy. There's a lot of people that come for the tax incentives, and everyone basically just picks up and leaves where they came from, and they arrive here in Puerto Rico very eager to make friends. You will meet incredible individuals here, people that think very similar to you do. People that think big at large, have created big, large businesses and have a lot to share. People are incredibly giving here and extremely helpful. The truth of the matter is that whether you are a long-term investor, when it comes to Bitcoin, stocks, golds, there is no better tax advantageous place to be than Puerto Rico. Peter Schiff, he lives here for a reason, as well as Mike Maloney. We all know Peter Schiff doesn't like Bitcoin, but I'm just saying that there are big dogs here. So before you consider buying that next Bitcoin, consider packing your bags and making your way over to Puerto Rico. If you're a person that can adapt easily, then you will have no issues adapting to Puerto Rico. Trust me, it's very different from the States, but many people consider it a good different. So I hope you enjoyed this video on why you should move to Puerto Rico before you buy your next Bitcoin. And that's all I have for you today. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Once I hit 500 subscribers, I'm giving away a second free Ledger Nano S. And make sure to check out the links down below so you can get free stock and free Bitcoin. That's all I have for you today. As always, go out there and create a portfolio that you love.